Welcome back, guys. Will Robinson here from Robinson's Auto. I hope everyone's doing well. Today, coming back into the shop, we have a 2010 Ford Flex. You may recognize this vehicle from the previous repair where we did the timing chain and water pump. That repair has since proved to be successful, so today we're taking it to the next step. It did briefly come back into the shop with a slight misfire. I narrowed it down to a faulty coil pack by swapping the coil with the adjacent cylinder, and the misfire traveled to that cylinder. Therefore, we replaced the coil pack, sent it on its way. We didn't want to spend too much time and effort on that repair because we still weren't certain at the time if the previous repairs were successful. If you haven't seen that video, I suggest that you check it out. I'll leave a link in the description. Today we'll be going in and replacing all 6 coils along with the plugs. Now that's not necessary, guys. If you're just doing a simple tune-up, you can go out and buy yourself a boot kit. It's pretty much like doing a traditional tune-up when you replace your plug wires. However, if the coil's good, you simply just got to replace the boot. You can buy these individually or as a set. It's just a boot along with a spring. Pop your old one off, apply your new one, give it a twist, make sure it's seated good. Apply a little grease along with your new plugs and you're good to go. The coils we'll be using today were provided by Wells Manufacturing. They're a leading manufacturer of ignition and electronic components throughout the automotive industry. I'll leave a link in the description. Let's do it to it.
So I'm going to start with the rear bank. So we're going to have to take off the intake duct. I already started with loosening the clamps. Move the hose. Another hose right here. There's a little gray tab here. You pull it, and you should be able to wiggle her up, just like so. And so next we got to focus on removing the upper intake plenum. In order to do so, it's easier to unhook this stuff from the clips than to try to remove the clips from the intake plenum, because they tend to break, and then once they break you don't have anything to retain it. So you can see what I do here. When it was in for the last repair, I actually took the tape off that secured it to the plastic retainer, and then when I was done I simply used zip ties. It's something I like to do. Keep everything tucked nice and neat. I actually want to look around to see what's all involved. This big hose, looks like it's about a 1/2 inch hose, maybe 3/4. It's got a clamp up top. There's no clamp on the bottom, so that hose will pop up off when we take and lift the intake plenum up. Now I do see some hoses here. Looks like it might be part of the evaporation system. So we're going to have to take and pop this retaining clip, push in on that yellow tab. Doesn't take much pressure, but it's hard, one hand. And then once you push it in, it'll pop out. If you come over here, you'll see the vacuum hose that runs from your intake plenum, and then it supplies the vacuum to your brake booster. However, you got to disconnect one side or the other to remove this upper intake plenum. This backside has a clamp on it, which would be pretty hard to gain access to. Therefore, I just simply unhook the hose from the brake booster. Okay, now if you look here underneath the throttle body, you'll see one retaining bolt. That there is for a support bracket that runs down to your block. So we're going to want to remove that. It looks like an 8mm head. Drive-by-wire connection. Simply got to release the lock, push in on the clip, plug it. Retaining bolt looks like an 8mm. Yes, I just confirmed it. Now it's not necessary, guys, to replace all the coils. It's just something I recommend and suggest after a comeback. You can go through the same process just to simply do a spark plug replacement, a simple tune-up. This will cover all the bases. Now we're ready to start removing retaining bolts to hold the upper intake plenum. There's also a little retaining bracket for the fuel line. It's 8mm as well. And we'll start removing this retaining bolt. You want to take and blow off any loose dirt, anything that can fall down into the lower intake prior to removing it. Okay, so now I got all the retaining bolts loose. You can take and remove them. You want to take note of the lengths, because there are different lengths. Pretty much all four corners are the same, along with the one front one. I don't see anything that's going to fall down inside on us. At this point, I think I'm ready to remove the upper plenum. Okay, we're good. With the upper plenum removed, I'm going to take and I'm going to put some rags or something in this lower intake to prevent anything from falling down inside. That's the last thing you want, is any foreign objects or material falling down inside the intake and causing internal damage. Because then you take the simple fix and turn it into a nightmare. With the upper intake plenum removed, now we can gain access to the rear coil packs along with the spark plugs. Pretty much resembles the front bank. You'll have these retaining clips. However, there's usually a safety lock, a red clip that you got to push back. Then you push down your retaining plug just like so. You can see this one here. Then you simply unplug it. You can repeat that process in the back. You got one retaining bolt on each coil, 8mm. You remove that, and then we'll simply remove the coil pack. Now you also want to look into, why did the coils fail? Why are we failing coils in the back bank? There's a couple things they say and claim that can cause this to happen. You're taking a coil with a long boot. You'll see as soon as I remove this coil what I'm referring to. Okay, you got this coil, you got this long boot, and the reason why it's so long and rigid like this is because it's going down into a cavity, a hole, a deep well, and then it's going onto the spark plug. And if you look here, I can already see signs of moisture. See that moisture on that plug boot? Well, what happens is moisture somehow is getting down into that well. Could it be a bad weather stripping for your hood, allowing rainwater to somehow seep through? Once I get everything sealed back up, I'm going to take and I'm going to clean this whole cowl panel and check this strip, this weather strip, make sure we don't have any leakage going on. But anything you can do to prevent this from getting any moisture down there. Actually, Wells has a very good video out there, and I'll put a link in the description, and they cover a lot of this stuff that I just described. But essentially what happens is the water gets down in there and then it wicks up inside this boot, and there's a spring, and then you start getting moisture in there and it's going to find another path to ground. So we're going to take all precautions. I also got this marine grade grease that was sent to me by Wells to apply on these coils to help prevent moisture from wicking up into that spring. And one thing I would like to mention too as well is that you have these spark plugs in the center of the cylinder head, right? So there's an oil seal that's going to have to take place to prevent the oil from going down into that chamber, that spark plug cavity. So you want to make sure your valve cover gaskets are good. You want to take an inspection camera or a mirror or something and try to look down inside and make sure you don't see anything obvious, you know. I'm seeing signs of a little bit of moisture down there. Maybe a little bit of residual oil. However, I can tell it hasn't been leaking since we did the repair. And we also put new gaskets on it at that time as well. So take a look, make sure you have no leaks down there, and verify any situation that could cause moisture or contamination to get down in that spark plug well. All these steps are going to ensure a quality repair. You know, I could throw the best parts at it, but if I don't do my job correctly, I can't blame them. So we're using a 5/8 spark plug socket. Make sure it has the rubber grommet. Okay. Once I get the spark plug loose, you can remove it. First inspection, you can see I got moisture down in that chamber. Man, that's a huge gap. You know, and that's another thing. The further this electrode's got to jump, the harder it is on the coil as well. So as the plugs wear down, the gap gets too large, and that can also compromise. As I mentioned before, the gap, the distance the spark has to travel between the electrodes is also a critical point and can put excess load onto the coil, because if it has a closer arc somewhere, it's going to take the path of least resistance. So the more this gap grows, the harder it is on your coil and your ignition components. Out of curiosity, I want to see how far off I am. My gauge only goes up to 80 thousandths, and as you can see, I'm probably closer to 90. We're going to be using the iridium plugs. You know, spend a little extra money, get the better plugs, get what they call for. These come pre-gapped, so they don't want you really messing with the gap that they set from the factory. However, I just want to see whereabouts I am. So I'm under 60, right around 50. You know, 50 I can get in there comfortably. So I'm going to say it's anywhere between 52 and 55 thousandths. And this one, my scale doesn't even go up high enough. I'm over 80 thousandths. So that could be another culprit. So they go hand in hand. Everything works together. Prior to installing the new plug, I'm going to take one more look down inside. As of right now, I'm sure you're not picking that up because of the glare, but it looks relatively good. And as I proceed on to the remaining cylinders, I'm going to compare the gap from plug to plug, just to make sure that we're within the ballpark, and you know, something during the assembly didn't get messed up. So I'm going to make sure I'm somewhere between 50 and 55 thousandths on all the new plugs. Now you want to make sure you use a good spark plug socket with the rubber boot in place. Some people like to use like a never seize on the plugs. However, guys, I never have, and I never had a problem. So we got our new plug in. Got it ran down snug. I usually just run them down. I know how it feels. I know I got a good feeling for doing tune-ups. I do them quite often. However, for the purpose of this video, taking towards the specs. Okay, now it's time for a new coil. A lot of times, Wells will provide a grease, a marine grade grease, along with their coils. It's packed in a container. However, I do have some that they shipped to me a while back, so I have it on stock. So I'm going to just squirt some inside the boot like so. Not only will this grease help the ease of removal next time, it'll also prevent the water from wicking up inside that boot. And I also like putting some on the electrical connections. Like so. Apply it into the boot and onto the electrical connection. I can take and reinstall the coil. Reinstall the retaining bolt. Tighten her down. action. Relock the lock. Now I'm going to take and repeat that process on the remainder 2 plugs and coils on the back tank. Okay, to replace the gasket is pretty self-explanatory. I went and picked one up, just the upper intake plenum gasket. Now we're going to take and reinstall the plenum. We got a hose back here. Let's go on. Once I installed that hose, everything fell down in place. And remember, one longer retaining bolt right here. And the remaining are all the same length. Okay, I'm going to take and run these all down evenly, starting from the center, working my way out. Okay, now I'm going to look up the torque specs and torque it down in the correct sequence. While she's in there looking up the torque specs for me, we could take and start hooking up the remaining components and whatnot. We're going to take and install the retaining bolt from that bracket that comes from the block. So I'll use my magnet to grab that. Drive-by wire. Brake booster vacuum line. Very important. Double check to make sure your breather hose is in the back. Good. This evaporation tube. Good. The little fuel line retaining bolt. How about it? Just want to make this snug. Remember, you're only going into plastic. Last thing you want to do is crack the plenum. Install that overflow hose. Go grab some zip ties. Tuck those in nice.
What engine?
3.5.
99C or 99C?
Non-turbo.
Huh?
Non-turbo C.
Front wheel or all wheel?
All wheel. Okay. Guess I should have told you guys all this information. So this is a non-turbo 3.5 all-wheel drive, limited edition. Okay, now we're going to take and torque the upper intake bolts to 89 inch-pounds. So number 1 is the upper one or the lower one?
Lower one in the middle.
Okay.
Upper one in the middle.
Okay.
Upper one on the end. Down below it.
Okay.
Bottom on this side.
Okay.
And top.
Yeah, I'm just going to go over them one more time. All torque at 89 inch-pounds. Okay, now I'm going to give you a shot of the front bank since you have a better view. These ones are missing their locking clips. However, you simply pull the clip back, pull that out like so, and remove the 8mm retaining bolt. So you got the retaining bolt removed. Take and pull the coil out. Inspect it. You want to take a look down and make sure you have nothing down inside. Really dry. So we're good. And now we're going to take our 5/8 spark plug socket extension. Like so. Just as comparison, highest I go is 80 thousandths. We're above 80 thousandths. I would say that's somewhere between 85 thousandths. Yeah, around 85 thousandths. So you know you're way out of specs on these old spark plugs. Here we have another new one. I've been checking these as we go on each and every cylinder, so we know we have to be somewhere between 51 and 57 thousandths. 50 thousandths just fits through, and the 60's too big, so we know we're definitely within specs, because I'm not much more than 50 thousandths, because it actually rubs slightly there, so it's probably around 52 thousandths. I'm going to take and install a new spark plug. Torque it down to 12 foot-pounds. Click, click. Like I said, guys, I got a pretty good feel for it. However, I do recommend torquing them. Got the new coil prep with our grease from Wells Manufacturing. So your retaining bolt. Click, click. I always recommend torquing everything to spec, guys. So your electrical connection. Now it would be nice if the locking clip was there. However, this one does retain itself real well. Okay, now I'm going to proceed on to repeating that process on the remaining two coils. Okay, we just finished up installing the remaining two spark plugs and coils. We took every preventable measure, as you've seen, to prevent the moisture from wicking back up or even getting into that well. What I did, I took and I cleaned all the perimeters before putting the coil packs back in, along with applying the marine grade grease. So I'm feeling pretty confident about this. Okay, at this point we can take and reinstall the air intake. Okay, all the hose. Breather tube. Okay, I'm pretty sure I got everything. Give it a once over. Air intake reinstalled. Hose clamps are tight. Both hoses I removed from this four-way are hooked back up. The evaporation control tube is hooked back up. Breather tube's hooked back up. All the coil packs plugged in, tightened, torque to specs, drive-by-wire. Lock that in. Don't want that one coming out. Plug back in. Fuel line retainer, mountain bracket retainer, upper intake plenum, tighten, torque to spec, front breather hose, front bank, coils, plugs, electrical connections plugged in. I think we're good to go. Okay, now there's only one thing left to do, and that's to start it up, see how it runs. Want to fire it up for me? There you go, nice and smooth. I can tell already it's running smoother than it did before. Can you turn it off? And I'd be willing to bet a lot of our causes for the ignition coils acting up was due to it needed a good tune-up. Those plugs were shot. You could tell by the electrode gap that they were well out of specs, and that's putting extra load on the coil packs, along with the moisture we found in the back cylinder. You may be asking, well, why didn't I tune it up last time? Because before, guys, if you remember, we were questionable if this motor was still good. We had a lot of antifreeze in the oil. And as you can see, to this day, it's still good. And it's been a while, and he's put a lot of miles on it since we did that water pump and timing chain. But it was very questionable because Ford told him it needed a new engine. So we took and we invested a lot of time and money into it by replacing the water pump and whatnot to prevent that oil leak from the front of the block. If you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link in the description. That was a pretty intense repair and a questionable repair if this engine was still good. Therefore, we skipped a lot of things, and I did recommend a complete tune-up once we knew everything was okay. There you have it, guys. That's how you replace the coils and plugs on a 2010 3.5 Ford Flex.